A Sweet Taste of Cake by The Descendant. Chapter 16. Vignettes. The gray mail-mare greeted Cupcake, the eyes of the Pegasus wobbling around as she passed her letter. As the Pegasus pony winged away, Cupcake let her gaze fall across an unfamiliar name that sat in return. She opened it gingerly and laid it before her on the floor in the sunlight. As she sat and began to read, the words became large in her perception. "Dear Mrs. Cake," it read, "I am writing to console you on the passing of your father, Quarry, these 10 months ago. I am sorry to reach you on this matter so late after his death. It has taken me so long to come to terms with it myself." Cupcake felt emotions rising up in her as she read the letter, as this complete stranger explained how her father played a part in his life, how they had been partners, how he had lied to her father, how her father had reacted in the typical fashion of his younger days. "I still walk with a limp," the letter continued, "and for most of my life I have lived in fear of your father, in anger at his act that shattered my body, and in shame for what I did to him that set us upon that path." Cupcake felt herself wavering on her hooves as she dealt with the conflicting emotions that the letter was bringing forth. It only got worse as it continued. "My son informed me more than a year ago that your father wished to make amends, and asked him to say hello in a genuine fashion," the letter went on. "And for months I was staggered by that fact, that your father was extending an olive branch when against everything I knew of the stallion, or more accurately, everything that I had convinced myself was true." Cupcake's hoof went to her mouth. "In the end, I wished very much to write to him, but I could not find no words. That he would want to, I hoped, ask for forgiveness and offer it. That was more than I could comprehend. I had made my life by using ponies to my advantage. When we had our altercation, that worldview was shaken. It had forced me to rely on others. In many ways, his thrusting me about was perhaps the greatest thing to happen to me. And what I took as his attempt to rectify the gap between us seemed to complete the act." Her eyes went moist as she continued to read. "The pony who sat down to write this letter is not the same one who your father detested, but instead the one that I can only hope to serve the forgiveness that he seemed to be offering, and that I would certainly have given. I am not only saddened that my hesitancy cost me the chance to present this letter to him. I instead deliver it into the hooves of some pony he undoubtedly loved very much. Sincerely," the letter concluded, "Penny Pinter." Cupcake gave a little huff of emotion as she lifted the letter and took it to the office. There she studied it again, ran her eyes over the words, and began writing a reply. Instead, she found herself once more trotting back out into the showcase room, making long elliptical orbits of a display of macaroons, before sitting once more in the sunlight that came in through the window. 10 months after his death, her father's life was reverberating, the strings of causality still pulling at the ponies he had encountered across his decades. "Some pony he undoubtedly loved very much," she repeated to herself. At once, a memory lifted through Cupcake. Quarry lifted her in a fast hug as she presented him the cupcakes that revealed her mark. The memory of his forelegs around her as he had scooped up his little cupcake. That feeling washed through her as the tears began. She sat there sniffling in the sunlight and wishing very much for Carrot to return home, very much wanting to bury her head in her husband's chest and let him embrace her. Though not as intimate, a figure that was also dear to her presented herself as Pinkie Pie bounced out from the kitchen. The mare seemed to screech to a halt as she saw Cupcake sitting in the light and heard small sobs rising for her. "Mrs. Cake!" called Pinkie, trying to her at once, nuzzling beneath her chin, laying her head to that of the older mare. "What's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong?" "Oh, Pinkie Pie, I'm sorry. I'm just missing my daddy again. Got a little letter about him, don't you know? said as he leaned into the puffy pink mane and let her head rest to the smaller mare as he offered her embrace. Together they sat there, sharing little remembrances of the departed stallion as ponies went by the window. Pinky recalled how he had always given her and her sisters cookies or candies when the family had come by the house or office. "I'm sorry, Pinky," said Cupcake, trying to smile as the tears ran down her face. "I'm so sleepy. I don't know why." "That's okay," said Pinky as she recalled something her own mother said time ago. "It's okay to cry. It really, really, really is okay to cry. He was a great guy and earned every tear. But he's happy now. I'm sure of it. I'm super duper absolutely sure of it, Mrs. Cake." Cupcake gave a small sigh and looked down to Pinky. As he did, Pinky smiled back up to her and touched her nose gently to the other mare. And with that, the two sat until Carrot returned, the stallion staring happily as the two most important mares in his life greeted him at the door. Pinkie Pie came bounding through the humid kitchen, mop and bucket at the ready. As the pink mare went spinning and galloping through space, she quickly worked to clear away any standing water. As she did, she explained her situation. I explained how she began to take a bath, but then realized that Gummy needed a bath before she left, as he did not want to leave dirty bedsheets behind over the holiday, so she had to try to do all at once and on and on and on and on and on. They could only smile at her as she stopped in mid-step, looked at them quizzically as they stood over the gingerbread house with their umbrellas. Life with Pinkie Pie. It was a daring adventure, one that had added so much joy to their journey together. One they would not have missed out on for all the world. As she ran her mop across everything, she sped off again, leaving them three to lower the umbrellas, certain that she would have the matter cleared up. She had grown here in the bakery. She was stronger now, notwithstanding all that happened in her own life. In fact, all of the challenges that she and her friends had faced always seemed to strengthen her. A growth that they saw with relief and joy. They watched her go with smiles on their faces, proud of the mare whose adult life had begun here under their watch, who they were stronger for having helped and guided. Cupcake looked to her husband once more, still saw the white dollop of frosting sitting across his nose, and once more it found a place in her thoughts. As they prepared to box up the gingerbread house, her happiness once more showed on her face as she wondered what exactly the fate of that spoonful of frosting would be. Once upon a hard examination table, a beautiful mare had sat using tissue after tissue, her tears running down her hospital gown. As she waited for her body to stop throbbing in pain, many different thoughts ran through her head. One of the thoughts was, if they were truly denied ever having foals of their own, what would their lives look like? Nearly a decade later, she knew the answer to that question. Knew that having Pinkie Pie in the bakery with them had provided them with someone to fill that space. As Pinkie's network of friends grew, somehow they too were drawn into the world of the cakes. Not foes of their own, yet reasonable facilities on so many levels. New faces came into their lives, ranging from the humble and meek ponies whose powers they could hardly even ponder. "Is this a Fluttershy?" As she stood in the kitchen drying dishes, she could not know that the first such entrance was happening on the other side of the swinging doors. Carrot winced as he saw the deliverer ponies attempt to bring the crate in through the front door. As they did, it tipped the paint off the frame and scuffled the wooden floor. As the unfolding tragedy revealed itself, the crate came to a sudden stop right in the middle of the so-cased room at Sugar Cube Corner. Much to his frustration and bemusement of the few customers that were walking about. Called a Pinkie Pie who bounded joyfully around the crate, ending with her hose held high above her. At once she looked at Carrot and fixed him with an inquiring stare. "What is it?" He checked the packaging label to be sure. When he was certain, he called out to Cupcake. "Honey bun?" He spoke, his enthusiasm garnering her attention as he trotted out from the kitchen. Pinkie Pie's enthusiasm was already evident. Even as Cupcake approached, she was already pulling at the boards, to gnaw at them. He pulled her away by the tail, making her drop the crowbar with what said she was being to insult the crate. As was often the case, their lifelong friends that they had made in the swamp upon their honeymoon had sent them another gift. As the smells of citrus rose from the crate, once more filling Sugar Cube Corner with the scent of things remembered. They used some of their fruit in the recipes, but the understanding, of course, was that some would be sold in the shop. In reply, with supplies of fine fabrics and goods not easily found in southern Equestria, the train speeding the well wishes between the distant friends who had always seemed as close as any they had ever made. The only difference is, the crate was so fast. Carrot took up the crowbar and used it in a much more gentle fashion than it seemed that Pinkie had been determined to use. As he pulled away the boards, the reason for the fastness of the crate was revealed. Inside stood a series of boxes rather than the traditional one or two, each one marked what it had contained. "Today smells like that time I worked on a kumquat farm," Pinkie began, bouncing around trying to peer within. "And I remember the smell because I would always smell the kumquats when I woke up, and when I went to sleep I would like to see kumquat." "Oh my!" interrupted Cupcake as she looked over Carrot's shoulder while Pinkie bounced around between them in an attempt to get a better view. "It must have been a good growing year." "Would you look at that," began Carrot. "We have oranges, nectarines, limes, lemons, and—" He had only a split second to stare into the eyes of his assailant before it was upon him. "Ah!" cried Carrot, spinning wildly as something bit down upon him. As Cupcake and Pinkie looked on, Carrot went around and around the room, his voice high in alarm as something dangled from his nose. Something that stared back at him with big purple eyes. Slowly he began to calm, realizing that whatever it was did not seem to be doing much. In truth, it just sort of dangled there with a moist presence. Eventually, Carrot came to a standstill in front of Cupcake and Pinkie Pie, emitting a low kind of whine of trepidation as his eyes went up to the mares and back to the creature that stood affixed to his muzzle. "Why, it's a little alligator," said Cupcake, looking her husband over as her fear washed away and was replaced by something more like a pleasant surprise. You get him off of my nose," asked the dubious Carrot, tilting his head back and forth, staring cross-eyed at the little creature that still grasped at him. It still stared back at him with big purple eyes that seemed to blink in a manner that seemed out of sync with one another. Gently, Cupcake and Pinkie pulled the alligator off him, making reassuring noises as it somehow seemed to croak and chirp back at them. To their surprise, Pinkie coaxed it off and gathered it into her hooves, rubbed at its shoulders and along its stomach. The little alligator made a croaking, chirping sound in reply. As he placed it on the floor, it simply stood there, looking at him with its purple eyes. "The poor little thing must be thirsty. Oh, if the boxes weren't even open, it must be famished too, don't you know?" said Cupcake as he led Pinkie towards the kitchen. Carrot was once again left alone in the showcase room, the few customers having fled screaming out into the streets at the mention of the word alligator. Those few customers, of course, were Rose, Daisy, and Lily. Carrot crossed his eyes to study his nose. He was surprised that there were no scratches. Could the little creature have no? He leaned closer to where it sat in the middle of the floor and blinked. "Hi there," he said in a quiet tone as he approached the little creature. "Say there, you're not so bad now, aren't—" It hissed at him. He danced his hooves in place. He looked back to the kitchen as the mares returned. "Oh, he's just scared, hungry, and thirsty, and he just needs somebody to look after him and take care of him and throw parties and make little outfits." As the case watched, Pinkie followed the creature around the room, Rose seeming to be full of vanity and her smile only growing wider. I honestly don't think it has any teeth," said Carrot as he watched Cupcake lay a few pieces of food around the creature.
You got teeth, all right, Tiffany. You got no teeth, you're all good,"
sang Pinkie Pie, picking up the hatchling and spinning it around the room. As the cakes looked on with their eyebrows arching, the little creature slipped her grasp and began biting her all over in an act that seemed like an imperfect mix of excitement, affection, and predation. With that, Pinkie deposited the creature in a punch bowl, only its eyes and tail visible as it floated among the contents.
"Look, it likes it. The gummy little alligator likes it, and he's all gummy because he doesn't have teeth. So I'm gonna call him gummy. Can we keep him?"
She said with unrestrained enthusiasm. Pinkie spun to a stop directly in front of them with a wide smile. With that, she lifted the bowl to them as the reptile within stared back down, with the unerring eyes that once more lost their synchronization. "Well," said Carrot, regarding his assailant skeptically, and watching as Pinkie lifted for the punch bowl to deposit it among the small snacks. "It's hardly a typical pet, and, in time—" In an instant, she felt a familiar hoof to his foreleg. He followed Cupcake's gaze to where Pinkie was sitting with the alligator. She already seemed so occupied with it, concerned over it, responsible.
"She can learn so much,"
Cupcake whispered in his ear. One part of Carrot simply wanted to call animal control and be done with it. He communicated this to his wife through his eyes. Her reassuring ones met his. The cakes regarded this scene a little bit longer, then gave their consent. Pinkie Pie grabbed up the hatchling once more and spun around happily as it clamped its jaws shut around her tail. With that, she hugged them both and trotted upstairs to fill the tub, giving it someplace to rest as she completed her chores. The cakes watched her go, once more amazed by something that the pink mare had brought into their lives. "There's an alligator living in a bakery, Ginger Snap," said Carrot in a sing-song voice. Cupcake giggled, placed her forelegs across his back, and nibbled at his ears in a way she knew he adored.
"And you wanted kids,"
she scolded as he slid beside him, running her body the length of his as her playful tone announced a smirk that was buried in the statement. "I still do," he said with his voice above a whisper. She looked up, saw him smiling back to her. With that, she ran her body the length of his again, ending beneath his chin with a long series of nuzzles.
"Oh, I do too,"
she said as she rubbed her head beneath his all the way down to his chest and up again. With that, she let him know that her heart was still open to that faraway place, even if the magic seemed to keep it far beyond the horizon. Life with Pinkie Pie. It was never boring. To their surprise, it was also rather, profitable. The pink mare was a well of energy, seemingly unable to expend it all, as he was constantly trying to meet every customer, seemingly to try to get to know every pony in Ponyville. As Pinkie grew to know more and more ponies, the more ponies would come to Sugar Cube Corner to meet her, spend time with her. Spend a few bits as they did.
"And this is Applejack and Mary."
Before long, the Carrot had to place a few tables outside the shop. Cupcake found herself recreating her days as a caterer as she saw to the ponies eating outside, those who made friends with Pinkie's other friends. It was far more than just the money, as Pinkie had a propensity to almost eat a day's earnings in a few monstrous bites, apparently fueling her endless energy. No, it was also the way she was increasing their social circle. It was the way she was filling their bakery with laughter and music. It was the way they would sit together and eat their meals, almost like a family.
"Oh, this is Rainbow Dash."
It was the way she would have quiet talks with Cupcake about little things, the way she learned from the older mare. It was the way she had huddled behind Carrot upon seeing a bat in the attic as he prepared another party. When she would ask him to giggle at certain ghosties, ones that were most persistent and sometimes metaphorical, and they would come and help her. It was the way that they were learning from her, growing because she was a part of their lives. This, then, is what invoked the word family and made it seem so very real. Carrie and Cake had never really done much on the night of the summer sun celebration. They respected the sovereign as much as any pony, but the thought of spending early morning hours among throngs of ponies was not nearly as appealing as spending time together. Their wish was to spend it sitting in their little parlor, or at most at the big house where Cheesecake and Wishing Well gathered Cupcake's extended family. On this, Piggy but differed. As the day drew on, Cupcake wondered how her young apprentice would be passing the night. Wondered what type of night the pink mare would have unfold before her. "Oh, honey, you don't know the half of it!" She could hardly guess. As Cupcake sat beside the counter, she found her attention being pulled to the cash register drawer. She wondered if it had ever been cleaned at all. She carefully pulled out the trays and lifted the liner. To her surprise, 2 pamphlets lay there, one dated nearly a decade earlier. Foster care. Adoption. Her eyes lingered over them for a great long while. He had obviously brought them home with him at some point. The dates upon them were not that long after they had learned the magic was not answering him. She began to lift her voice to call to him when a ball of airsy burst into the room. "Mrs. Jake! Mrs. Jake!" called Pinkie Pie, swimming about and gathering up supplies in a blur of motion. "I just met a new pony, and she's a unicorn, and she's got a dragon." I was like, "Oh my gosh, I've never seen her before, so she must be a new pony." "And you see it's a new pony at Ponyville, then it means it doesn't have any pony yet." Cupcake watched as Pinkie continued to zoom about. As he did, a small pile of party supplies grew in the showcase room. "So, I thought that if she doesn't know any pony, then she must not have any friends. If she doesn't have any friends, she must be lonely. And that made me sad. And since that made me sad, I thought that must make her sad too. Then I didn't like that, so I thought about ways she could meet ponies. And of course, the best way to do that is to throw a party." Cupcake still stared at Pinkie Pie as a small mountain of supplies seemed to fit within a suspiciously small saddlebag. Only her party cannon seemed to be absent from the stack that disappeared within. With that, Pinkie seemed to go up the stairs, yet emerged from the basement door. "So, now I'm going to go to the library and set up, and then I'll bring every pony there, and then we'll have a great big, ginormous, super duper spectacular welcome party for her, and then we'll all go to City Hall for the summer sun celebration, and I hope you two have a really, really, really good night. Bye!" And inside an instant, Cupcake felt herself wrapped in one of Pinkie's marvelous hugs. The mare appearing beside her from out of nowhere and disappearing just as quickly. "Oh, that sounds nice. Have fun now," she called after her, watching as the smiling face bounced out the door. Silence hung over the bakery once again. Cupcake looked down and saw that, despite all that had just happened, her hub was still holding up the liner, revealing the 2 pamphlets to the light. She smiled at them. With that, she lowered the liner once more. Despite his good intentions, their lives had not moved in that direction. The life of a young mare had been planted among theirs for whatever reason, and she was happy for it. With that, she let the pamphlets rest once more and slid the drawer back within the register. The Cakes sat up together long into the night and deep into the morning. They did all the small things that they always wished to do together that they rarely had time for. They read poetry, listened to music, looked through albums, and wrote letters. This is how they passed the shortest night of the year, just as they had for nearly a decade, apart from those years at the big house where the noise of teenagers and awkward conversation with Cupcake's brothers nearly drove Carrot mad. Together, they took their coffees, caffeine fueling them, and sat in front of the large picture window of the bakery, and awaiting the dawning of the summer sun. Yet, the sun did not come.
"Oh my,"
said Cupcake as minutes passed.
You don't think they're coming down here to Ponyville through the Princess Albertuts, do you?"
I don't know, Sugar Plum," spoke Carrot, taking her hoof in his. "You wouldn't think so, would you?" Together, they continued to stare out into the pre-dawn darkness, pondering what could be going on in the city hall whose spires and flags were just visible in the darkness of over the nearby buildings. Their eyes went wide as ponies began running through the streets. They looked at one another as they saw the fear painted across the eyes of those who ran by. Carrot opened the door with Cupcake at his side as they tried to make sense of what was happening. "Thunder Moon!" called a pony that pelted past, one of their usual customers apparently seeing the confusion in their eyes. "The Mare of the Moon!" It was a name that should not exist, one that lived only in fairy stories. Together, they looked to the moon and saw that it indeed had changed. Despite every part of their logical minds telling them it could not be happening, they knew. They believed.
Piggy!
Cupcake breathed as he looked up to her husband. Inside an instant, the cakes were struggling past the crowd, trying to head towards City Hall as ponies streamed in the other direction in the darkness. As they did, Carrot tried to pick out the familiar faces in the crowd, catch the eyes of the customers he knew. "Hey, Big Mac, have you seen Piggy Pie? Piggy Gord, do you know where Piggy is? Sparkler, did you see Piggy? The man who worked at my bakery?" He said as the pony slid past him. As East apologized, he moved on to the next, keeping himself close to Cupcake as they approached City Hall.
"Oh, can you help us, please?"
She asked the crowd at large, some ponies stopping to look to her before being swept away.
"Oh, can somebody help us?"
she said as they came upon the steps of the circular structure.
"We can't find our Piggy Pie. Have you seen her? Has anyone seen our Piggy Pie? Have you seen our daughter?"
Carrot spun to her as he heard the word. He looked upon her just in time to see her bounce through the last utterance of hurt, to see the words shake through her. Cupcake looked at him, her eyes already misting over, the shine of the rose highlighting it even in that undying light. He sat before her. In an instant, she was back in the one place in the world where she felt safest, pressed to his chest as forelegs ran across her, grabbed her closer to him.
"Carrot, Cupcake,"
said a familiar voice, as Ivory's script called out orders to the few ponies who had maintained their senses. She trotted down to them, looked upon her best friends with worry. "Ivory," said Carrot, "do you know where Pinkie Pie is? Did she come here? What happened?" As Ivory explained what had transpired, Cupcake looked at her head and listened intently. Pinkie had gone off with a group of other mares, led it seemed by a young unicorn who Ivory believed to have had some sort of grasp of the situation. The news brought Cupcake no comfort. As the square around City Hall began to vacate, the two sat there, Cupcake still finding a reassurance in his embrace. They walked through the city streets to the bakery wordlessly. They sat at the picture window together, looking out into the streets, comforting one another with their presence for long hours. When the sun did erupt into the sky, it found them lying across one another, the blearing faces coming awake, looking perhaps more like worried parents than they knew. When Pinkie Pie came trotting back into the bakery, her detailed account of what had transpired was instantly muffled beneath a massive hug, one that she returned gladly as two ponies rocked her and cried over her. Strings of causality. They are the very fabric of fate. They stretch, twist, snarl, and get caught and snagged. They also lie beside one another, are woven and knit. One can only tie, though many bind, and hundreds clothe. If a beloved stallion, now departed from his mortal life, had not gone grumbling through the streets, the Pinkie Pie would never have found a place of refuge with these two ponies. If Cupcake and Carrot Cake had not fought so hard to force their lives together, then Cheesecake would never have entered Pinkie's life, never helped her truly understand who she was. If the Cakes had not opened their lives to her, accepted her so fully, then she would never have become the bright, shining Pinkie Pie that we all know and cherished and loved. If she had never became that Pinkie Pie, then there would not have been a place for the element of laughter to hang so lightly. And Equestria would have been damned to an eternity of night under the cold gaze of a mare of darkness. Love makes the strings, pulls them tighter, pulled her into their lives, and helped Pinky share hers with them. Soon her friends, these 6 in the Dragon Whelp, they became as frequent set of visitors to Sugar Cube Corner as any other. In fact, they seemed at times to be a part of the very life of the place. It was the strings that kept pulling them together. They helped them through the hard times. Times when parasprites had flown around and attempted to devour all that they had worked for. Only Piggy's randomness that they had taken a part of their lives had saved all. String pulled them together in times of laughter, when they too played their parts in the little games and jokes her friends had learned to play under her guidance. Times when they had joined in the pranks, made themselves part of a farce about accursed cookies and enchanted alligators. The strings guided them through happy times, the times when their family had come together and had celebrated their 10th anniversary in a celebration that Pinky had planned, as they had danced together like they had at that dance hall long ago, when their tongues first met together. And the strings continued to bring ponies into their lives. Twilight Sparkle had been a meticulous planner. She had selected the downstairs rather than an attic so that there would be free movement around Sugar Cube Corner, making it easier for the guests of honor to be served directly under the kitchen. The case had simply listened as the unicorn had planned everything from the seating arrangements to the menu, watching as her dragon whelp walked behind her and copied down her words as she paced back and forth. When the day arrived, Carrot found a new face in his kitchen. As he gave simple instructions, he found her dragon whelp, Spike, excited to play his part. The cakes even produced a little Seth's uniform for him, one he immediately adored and wore proudly. As he trotted back out into the showcase room and the side rooms, he saw all the happy faces had assembled. "How's everybody doing?" he asked, his smile only growing larger as he neared his wife and the guests who sat in their humble bakery. "Good? Good!
Is there anything else we can get for you today?"
asked Cupcake, jumping at a touch of her choice of word.
Was it Steve, guess?
"Everything is fine, Mr. and Mrs. Cake," replied the immortal sitting behind their table, looking up across from the best teacup that they had. Together, they looked out over the crowd and watched as the guests strolled beneath the colorful decorations that only Pinky could set in place, taxing even Twilight's abilities to control. They circulated around the bakery, Cupcake bringing trays of treats around to the assembled guests. It was a small gathering, casual as it could be for having the fairy living embodiment of deep magic using her grandmother's old teacup and having guards posted at the doors. Cupcake tried to remember that fact as she dealt with the foibles of the afternoon. Pinky's friend Rarity seemed to have breakdown at the thought of staining her dress. Pinky herself apparently snatched a cupcake out of the very magic of their seemingly divine guest of honor. As Cupcake quickly dragged Pinkie Pie away and gave a quick lesson of interaction with divinities, Carrot brought Celestia another cup of tea and a new cupcake. As her teacup was emptied, he heard his wife shout across the showcase room, her decisiveness at the fore.
"At the teacup at 4 o'clock!"
she called, gesturing with her hoof.
"I see it, honey bun!"
he called back, leaping into action, quickly pouring another cup for the alicorn.
Thank you,"
answered the immortal. "Not at all, your highness," answered Carrot with a bow. In an instant, he had emptied the cup, the larger frame of the sovereign simply taking larger sips than those who had surrounded her. At once, Cupcake had filled her cup, facing from the other side of the room and beginning a chain of filling and emptying. A look of small concern flashed across Celestia's face as he looked down over her children. These 2 earth ponies were only trying to please her. She wished she would not try so hard. They had already done so much on her behalf. A look of playful cunning swept her, and with one more motion she tricked Carrot into pouring her a new cup, one that fell into a cup that was already full. "Ha! Gotcha!" As a sheepless look went across Carrot's face, Celestia smiled down to them, Cupcake sharing in the smile of her sovereign, realizing what she had done. After a moment, Carrot recovered too. Soon he understood, saw that there was something buried there, something that fell from the alicorn softly as she looked across them, across all of the ponies in the room. Carrot looked upon the two smiling figures, the alicorn and the earth pony mares. A memory hit him, one of Cupcake dressed as the alicorn now sat near them on a nightmare night long ago. As the radiant beauty fell from the princess, he could certainly see it reflected in the mare he loved. And in that instant, he was very thankful for both the divine creatures in his sight. Outside, Ivory's script paced back and forth, important issues on her mind. The thought of interrupting this party troubled her, knew that it was something that was big and important, and that her two best friends were hosting. Yet, friendship or not, she had a duty before him. "Excuse me, Cuppy, Carrot," she breathed in a whisper. With that, she advanced to the guards. As they eyed her, she kept her head level. "Please inform Her Majesty that Ivory Script, Mayor of Ponyville," she said, slowly moving her eyes between them, "has an urgent issue she must discuss at her earliest convenience." The two royal guard ponies looked at one another, and with that, went off to whisper the matter to the princess. Half an hour or so later, the party had been cleared away, and the sound of dishes washed chimed across the kitchen. The sound of crockery full of leftovers finding its way into the icebox, and the single resonant of notes of the teacups being placed back into their cupboard joined them in a small chorus. The bell above the door rang out, adding its own sound to the refrain sounding through the bakery. "'Cause you see, whoever that is, honey bun, my hose are full," said Carrot, nervously wobbling along with his forelegs full of china. "Oh, righty," she answered. She trotted out to the kitchen and into the showcase room. With that, she once more entered the princess of Celestia of Prussia, Celestia Infinicus von Solaris, the alicorn having returned to their humble bakery. "Oh, hello again, you dear. Oh, I mean, Your Majesty. Well, isn't that brings you back to us?" "I do wish to thank you for hosting this get-together," said the sovereign, while her mane shifted around on magic unseen. "Twilight had been planning it for so long." "Oh, it was no problem at all. Twilight, it was a delight to work with, dearie, and I mean, Majesty," she exclaimed with a smile, trying to recover from the use of her word. No sense of impropriety seemed to fall from the alicorn. No disgust seemed to follow her use of such a common name. Instead, the opposite seemed true, as though the princess seemed to grow happier as the two smiled to one another. "I was wondering, perhaps you have seen my pet bird?" asked Celestia as she lifted her hoof and pointed to where the stand had once stood. "I have not seen her since the party." "Oh, no, I haven't, Your Majesty," Cupcake said, her hoof coming to her mouth. Let me ask Carrot if he's heard or seen—" "Oh," interrupted Celestia, still smiling over to the mare that stood before her. "That is quite all right. She has a propensity to get into all sorts of trouble. I'm sure she will show up." The two mares stood there in the afternoon light, blinking to one another in the sunlight that the alicorn had raised over her domain. "I was also wondering if I may purchase some pastries. The court loves to try from all over Equestria, and I should like to display some of yours," added the sovereign as she looked back down upon the wares of Sugar Cube Corner. "Of course! We'd be honored, sir, the dear Majesty." "I am not Majesty, that's the other girl," added Cupcake as her miles grew wider. "I am very glad," spoke the alicorn as he gracefully turned to look upon Cupcake. "I shall have my chamberlain send for them, send your stipend and a courier." And once her smile dropped, Celestia's expression became one of sympathy as Cupcakes fell down into reflection. the face of the sovereign tilting as she mused over the questions that were now filling her child. Inside Cupcake, thousands of unanswered infos flew around. The pain of 10 years of trying to no avail swept up inside her. Before her stood perhaps the only living embodiment in Equestria, being in all of Equestria, that could answer her questions, offer some solace. With a rush of emotion, she moved to ask her sovereign if it was possible that the journey might still bring them to that place.
Majesty, Princess,
she began, trembling a little as she vented her thoughts.
I'm sorry to be so bold, but I had to ask. You see, Karen and I wanted to, been trying to...
The fall of hooves of the alicorn sounded across the wooden floors. With a single gentle motion, Celestia lowered her head to that of Cupcake. She kissed her forehead once, and then ran her face along Cupcake's tenderly. Cupcake felt the power that lay there. Inside her mind, pastel colors shifted about and darted through her landscape. She felt a powerful and deep magic shifted around her, as though it were being examined, questioned. Beyond her, a well opened up in more colors. One that seemed to waft around her and cradled her. Inside it, 2 golden spears wafted on silver clouds, darting about and flying to her, orbiting her in what seemed like peals of laughter. After a moment, her sovereign's hand lifted to her ear. The vision fell out of Cupcake's eyes and mind as the gentle voice fueled her. "They are going to be beautiful, Cupcake," whispered the alicorn, the words falling slightly over the earth pony. With that, Celestia brushed a stray waft of her radiant mane out of her face. She smiled over her confused Cupcake once more, and departed to her cute corner in search of her wayward phoenix. You people could probably guess what happens next, don't you?